listeners. I'm your host, Jacko's Wetsuit, and today it is Wednesday, June 15th, 2022, and today I'll be speaking with Hyangsu, a woman with a very interesting story and a very moving story about herself and her family, about Koreans in Japan, and about North Korean prison camps. But first, I'd like to remind everyone, please, to leave a review about this podcast on iTunes or whatever platform you use to download it, and share this podcast episode with colleagues and friends and even enemies and people you don't know. On Spotify, you can leave a rating with no reviews, but please do that anyway. And if you're listening on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. Secondly, check out NKNews.org, where you will find all the latest in-depth stories written by the excellent journalists who are my colleagues and friends. Consider buying a subscription for a year. It's much more affordable than you think. In fact, if you sign up for the annual plan, it's less than $1 a day, and that helps to, as I say, keep my journalists fed and clothed. Thirdly, follow us on Twitter. You can find NKNews.org, all one word, on Twitter, and myself at JACCOZED. And that is it for the commercial part. Now to talk about today's guest. Hyangsu is a Japan-born and raised Korean citizen called Zainichi in Japan and Jail Dongpo or Jail Gyopo in Korea. She now resides in South Korea. Her relatives are among the many thousands of ethnic Koreans who moved from Japan to North Korea between the 1950s and the 1980s. And if you heard my recent interview with Marcus Bell about his research on that group, that's recorded in his book Outsiders, you'll be a little bit familiar with that topic already. If you haven't, you might like to go back and listen to that interview with Marcus Bell first. So to set the context for today's interview a little bit, I want to talk to my colleague Ifang Bremer, Seoul correspondent for NK News, who introduced me to Ms. Park's story. Ifang, you wrote about Hyangsu's story in your June 10 article, Activists Fear North Korean Human Rights Issues Increasingly Met with a Shrug, and then you introduced me to her and suggested I interview her. Why was that?
Yeah, that's right. I cover mostly human rights and facto issues, and I met Hyangsu at an NGO event in Seoul, and her story was so compelling and moving to me that I talked to her after the event, and we came to speak about how it's getting more and more difficult to get attention of a wide audience to North Korean human rights issues. So yeah, I thought it would be great to have her on the show, and so that our listeners can listen to her story, told by herself.
And is it particularly difficult to get a wider audience interested in South Korea, or are you talking about just anywhere in the world?
I think the issue is bigger than just South Korea. But particularly in South Korea, NGOs express the sentiment of decrease in funding, also a decrease in attention. That is from the general public. NKDB, one of the NGOs here in Seoul, releases a poll every year on how much attention, how much interest South Koreans have in North Korean human rights. And you do see a decrease every year. At the same time, these human rights violations are not getting any better. So that is a real challenge that this community is dealing with.
Okay, well, thank you. That's great. That's some good context setting there. I'm going to throw Ifang out of the studio now and welcome Hyangsu to sit in his chair, and we'll continue with the interview. Back in a moment. Hyangsu, thank you very much for coming all the way to the NK News studio today.
Thank you for having me.
Could you share with us a little bit about your life story? Where were you born? Where were your parents from? And so on.
Okay, my name is Hyangsu Park. I was born and raised in Kobe, Japan. And I am the third generation Zainichi Korean. Zainichi means staying in Japan, but its ordinary means that the permanent long-term residence in Japan. And I am the third generation Zainichi Korean.
So your parents were also born in Japan?
Yes.
And where did your grandparents move from?
South Korea. During the Japan's rule period.
Do you remember the province or the city name?
Yes, it's Busan.
From
yes,
Busan. Okay.
My grandmother moved to Japan when she was 4.
Mm-hmm.
She said it was 1920s, the
Okay.
late 1920s, with her parents. And she settled in Japan. And my family belonged to Chongryon, if you know.
Yep.
It's the General Association of Ethnic Koreans in Japan who support North Korea.
Right.
Yeah. And the reason why we supported Chongryon and we all went to the Korean school, which is operated and governed by
Called the Minjok
Chongryon.
Hakgyo?
Yes, Minjok Hakgyo, but it's more than Minjok. It's more political. And I was educated there from kindergarten to high school. And the reason why my family belonged to Chongryon was mainly because we had a family in North Korea who repatriated to North Korea during the Paradise on Earth campaign, which you mentioned before.
Yes. I want to come back to that later, to your family members who moved there. Tell us a bit more about the Minjok schools, the Chongryon schools. We've never really discussed that on the podcast. So you said that there's a lot of political education there. Tell us some of the political education that you received at the schools.
Okay, I remember that the first time I entered the school, I saw the Kim Il-sung 원수님 고맙습니다, the signboard.
Yes.
It's the thank you, the great marshal, Kim Il-sung. And the first song I learned at the kindergarten was also the propaganda song, which showing, the loyalty to Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung 원수님 고맙습니다. I can still sing the song, I memorized all the word.
Yeah.
And then from the 4th grade of the elementary school...
Wait, let me interrupt. Did you grow up speaking Korean at home, or did you learn it at the school?
At the school.
Okay, so you grow up, you spoke Japanese at home.
Sure.
But in the school, you began to learn Korean.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my grandmother's only spoke in Korean, mainly spoke in Korean.
Okay.
And from 4th grade of the elementary school, they began the ideological education. And there was a subject called revolutionary history, 혁명 역사 of Kim's family.
Yep.
And we had to memorize all the word instruction that he, mentioned.
Yeah.
And the textbook was all red. And there was the special classroom that we had to go during that class. The classroom was different. You know? It was a special room.
Was it like a museum?
Yes, there's a red carpet, and there's the statue of Kim Il-sung, and of course there was a portrait of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il in the classrooms, and we also wear the red ties of 소년단. That's the boys and girls band. Just like North Koreans do in North Korea.
Scarf.
Yes, neck scarf. And we say that 항상 준비, always ready, like this.
With the special salute.
Yes,
45-degree angle salute.
Yes. And that kind of education started in the elementary school, and it becomes more, it continues until the high school.
Right.
And I didn't like that.
Yeah.
It was so hard for me to, understand why we have to learn this and memorize the words, because we are living, outside school. It's Japan.
Right.
And the gap was too big for me. But I don't know.
Did you say this to your parents?
Yes.
And how did they react?
They knew that, but they said, can't be helped because, so I just, had to admit that this is the way that our family have to adopt. But Korean school is, slowly changing these days because, the number of students is decreasing sharply. It's like, when I was there at 80s, there was about 50,000 students.
Throughout Japan?
Yeah, throughout Japan. And there was about 200 schools in Japan. But now it's under 60 schools remains, and the number of students is declining. It's like under 5,000, I've heard.
So how many students were in your class together usually? Was it sort of between 30 and 40?
Yeah, 30 and 40.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you go on, with your class, did you make a school trip to North Korea on the ship?
Yes.
What's it?
수학여행. Yeah, the graduation trip.
I'm thinking the name of the ship. There's a very famous...
만경봉호.
The Mangyongbong.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you made that trip from Japan to North Korea to look around Pyongyang and see some other sites. Tell us a little bit about that trip, that school trip. How old were you and what did you see? And how did you feel seeing Korea for the first time?
Okay. the before graduating from high school, it was a tradition of going to the educational trip to North Korea for Korean school high school students, and it's like 2 weeks, 10 days or 2 weeks, schedule, and we had to go to the Niigata port, the northern part of Japan, and the first time I went to North Korea twice, and the first time at the graduation trip, that was the Samjiyeon-ho. It's the older one before Mangyongbong-ho ferry. And Samjiyeon, I rode Samjiyeon ferry and went to North Korea. And it was my first time, of course, to go to the fatherland. The school taught me it's our fatherland.
Right.
And
even though your grandparents came from Busan, they'd never been to North Korea.
I have to tell you about my grandparents' story too, because I have two grandmothers. My grandmother on father's side hate Korean school and hate North Korea because she experienced Korean War in Busan. She once returned to South Korea, Busan, her hometown, after the World War II in 1945 with my dad.
Right.
And she stayed in Busan for 8 years. She witnessed the brutality of communists.
Wow.
That's what she said. So she always said, they are red. They are communists. They are evil. And they could do everything for ideology.
Right.
So she was scared of, the red people. She said always, 빨갱이 is 무섭다. Scary 빨갱이.
Right.
And then she didn't like us, going to Korean school. But there's no way because my dad was working for a bank affiliated with Chongryon. That's the only way he could make a living. There was not, the variety of job that Zainichi Koreans could get in Japan during that period. So, it's so complicated. But my grandmother on mother's side...
Was your father ideological? Did he have a feeling about, a good or bad feeling about North Korea?
He wanted to trust North Korea because that's where he belongs to.
Right.
And 80% of Zainichi Korean used to belong to Chongryon.
Right.
It was so strong, and the socialist ideology was more supported even in Japan, the media and everything at that point. And the image toward South Korea was so negative. It's always, the turmoils, the demonstration by students and uprising and massacres and everything. And
military dictatorship, fascism.
We learned that it's the puppet regime of the United States.
Right.
And, so it was so negative. So we all wanted to trust the promising socialist fatherland of the North Korea. So my father tried to trust, and his cousins and his close friends all went to North Korea during the Paradise of the campaign. During that campaign,
that's the period from the 1950s to the 1980s, when many thousands of Zainichi moved to North Korea.
And he even wanted to go.
Your father wanted to go.
Yes.
Why did he not go?
Right after marriage with my mom, my parents, that was 1967, and after participating at our parents' wedding, my uncle, which is my mom's brother, left for North Korea. At the age of 17.
17.
Okay. Alone.
And
chasing his girlfriend.
Wow.
Okay. And they were, they were going to go, after him. They really wanted to go to North Korea. But my grandmother on father's side, she went through the Korean War that I told you before. That she said, kill me if you want to go to return to North Korea. You have to kill me. So she was, she opposed to that. So they gave up. And my mother was pregnant right after the marriage. So she said she gave up. And then, she received, all the letters and, rumors from North Korea that it's a terrible day.
So your uncle, he wrote letters back to Japan. What could he say in those letters? I heard from Marcus Bell when I interviewed him that it was very difficult to be honest in those letters. So what could he say?
it is all monitored and censored, so he could not write the honest feeling. But the first letter, he said, "Please send me a hot air balloon." And that made my mom cry. She said, it implies that he really wanted to go back to home, even resort to a balloon.
And that, how long after he moved to North Korea did he write that letter?
I've heard it's a year later.
Okay. So
or
quite
something.
quickly then. Wow.
And we often received a letter, It was
So he often wrote?
And he and my father's friends and cousins, mostly asking for help.
Financial help?
Yes.
So please send money or please send goods.
Goods, clothing, commodities, sometimes medicines. We even sent them cars, the used car, the bicycle, piano, guitars, everything. The raincoats, I remember,
Yeah. So your father worked for a bank, which was affiliated with the Chongryon. Does that mean he had some political connection, some power? Was he able to do something to help his brother-in-law?
Yes, because he had a chance to visit North Korea quite often. He did.
So your father was one of those regular Chongryon visitors to North
Yes,
Korea, right?
And he tried to invest on North Korea, that it's mining development, something, So he collected money from Zainichi rich people, and then he tried to invest on North Korea, but he gave up, in the middle, because he told me that it's like throwing away the money investing on North Korea, because the high-ranking officials in North Korea, they are only interested in their self-interest, and it was so different that he dreamed of. And he made a business trip to North Korea twice or three times via China by airplane, and he said he met a secretary or something of Kim Jong-il, or something like that, and he visited the mining near Kumgangsang.
Yes.
And he said he was so sad looking at the young girls digging without any equipment, by bare hands.
Oh.
And he saw them eating some obento, the toshirak, the lunch.
Lunchbox.
Yeah. It didn't seem like a food. It was terrible. Everything was terrible, and he thought he was making a big mistake, so he stopped. That's how he quit the organization, the Chongryon.
So this is what your father saw.
Yeah.
And he stopped. He quit his job and he left the organization, his political home for many years. He left it.
He decided to leave after that.
That must have been quite a painful moment for him, I suppose.
Yeah, and he started to run a pachinko parlor.
Have you read the book?
Of course.
In Korean translation?
No. Yes, in Korean.
Yep.
And I also have an English book of Min Jin Lee's Pachinko. And I also watched the drama.
You've watched the drama too?
Yes,
okay.
it was...
Tell us how you felt about it. What's your feeling, your comment?
I feel, first of all, I feel very thankful, to Min Jin Lee.
Yeah.
It's great work, she has done. She's even, she doesn't speak Japanese or even Korean, but she did all the researches. She says it took her
7 years or many years.
Many years.
Yeah.
And I was so happy that I don't have to explain what Zainichi is.
Right.
To the people. Now many people know what Zainichi is, the minority group, the Korean group now, and the Sonja, the main character. The main character. That's like my grandmother's story, and I could feel the sympathy to the Solomon because he didn't like the pachinko parlor that his father was running, and that's how I felt about my father.
Right, because you're a third generation also, and your father he quit. What in many, I guess, in Chongryon society, your father had a good job, right? He worked for a bank,
yes,
and he quit that to run a pachinko parlor. That would be seen by many as a step down.
stepped down, but we became richer after running pachinko. But I thought, the pachinko industry is a dark side of the Japanese society, and I was not proud of, that kind of business because it's related with Yakuza and everything. And, when I meet my Japanese friend at university, I went to the Japanese school after graduating from Korean high school. I went to Hawaii to study English, and I went to the Japanese university.
Which was only possible because your father had made this money through the pachinko parlor.
Yeah, partly because we are rich enough, he could afford our education, and it was a shame for me to say my father is running a pachinko parlor to Japanese friend. I try to hide that. So,
what percentage? I don't expect you have the answer for this, but are most pachinko parlors in Japan run by Zainichi Koreans?
Yes.
90%? I mean, any idea? Is it almost all of them?
I don't know, accurate,
But most of them.
Even Chongryon, by organization, they are running pachinko parlor too.
Right. Well, when I was in North Korea last time in 2019, we went in Pyongyang to I forget the name of the place, but it's a place where you can pay money and receive a gun and shoot some bullets. It's a shooting range. There's a special name for it. And you can shoot at a target, or you can go outside and you can shoot at a pheasant, and then you can eat the pheasant.
Oh.
And in that building, there are also some other amusements, and in one room they called it the pachinko room, and they have some machines in there. Maybe these are machines from Japan, I don't know, but they use the word pachinko, and they have the same kind of machines there.
Yeah, that's from Japan.
And in also there's a bowling lane in Pyongyang, and that bowling lane also has one floor which is all pachinko machines. And I saw men playing the game with the little balls there, so I thought, they do have them from Japan. So there is a connection there.
Of course, the connection is so strong, There was always a big donation to the fatherland. So every workers under the Chongryon enterprises, every employees had to, donate the money to North Korea from their salary.
Right. Now, there's also a Chongryon University in Japan. I think it's in Pyongyang.
It's in Tokyo.
In Tokyo. I'm got my capitals confused there. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, in Tokyo. Is it Koryo University or Choson University?
Choson Daekyo.
Choson Daekyo, yeah.
My mom was there.
Your mom went there. So you did not go there. Why was that?
Oh, I really didn't want to go there. I tried to escape because my teacher really, persuaded me to go there.
At high school?
Yes, because I was one of the elite students at Korean high school. There is a special program for elite students.
When you say elite, is that because your grades were better than other students, or because your father worked for the Chongryon, or?
Both.
Okay.
And I was like, the 모범생.
Yep, a model student.
Yes. I could not, do the bad thing, and I was always obedient to the teacher.
Right.
And there was a special course. It's like a secret course. The ordinary student don't know what we are doing. They call it 학습반. It's a study group.
Okay.
Study group. It's the selected elite students, and we had to stay overnight at school once a month.
Wow.
And have a special ideological education, and we were taught that we should be the elite to, protect the Chongryon community in Japan and contribute for our fatherland. And that kind of education was so hard for me to accept. So when I was the second year of the high school, I started to think about maybe I want to get out of this community.
Yep.
And I started to dream of going to United States to learn English.
But the United States is the enemy.
Yeah.
You were told.
Yeah, we were told enemy, but I knew they're not enemy because, outside school, there is so many information that I can, search, and my parents were also, supported me. They were supportive, because my mom went to 조선대학교
yeah.
and she dropped out.
She dropped out?
Yes.
Why?
The first year, she said she was mentally sick.
Wow.
Because every morning she had to run the ground shouting 만세 to Kim Il-sung or 조국 통일, reunification for Korea, or all the ideological education. She was going crazy, she said. And it's all, dormitory. Dormitory, They can't go home. Even, their house was near the school. They have to live in the dormitory. And it was so hard for her, and she dropped out.
Now, I'm fascinated by this because the Chongryon is kind of like a society within a society, right? You've got Japan, 120 million people, or whatever the number is, and then 50,000, 80,000 Chongryon in there with their own schools, their own university. What kind of job was this university preparing students for? What could graduates of Chosundaekyo do in Japan?
Enterprises affiliated with Chongryon or school teachers of Korean schools. Yeah, my friend became teachers a lot, after graduation. Or the bank, they have a bank.
Right. So, but quite limited then. You've really got a number of specific career paths that are possible, but there's not many choices possible.
But there are numerous organizations under Chongryon, like travel agency, or marriage consultant, legal support, or art company. They even have a newspaper company.
Right, yeah, of course, yeah. What about medicine, doctor, nurses?
Yeah, there is the hospital.
Oh, I see.
Under Chongryon.
Right. Okay, so it's interesting. I didn't know that.
Insurance company too. It's all, the inner circle is it's circulation.
Right. So to go back to, so there you are, you're at high school, you're an elite student, you're being prepared to go to Chosundaekyo, you're in these secret monthly education sessions. Did you also have to do self-criticism, the Senghwa Chonghwa every week?
Yeah, Chonghwa, yeah.
You had to write about your mistakes and...
Or criticize somebody who spoke Japanese.
But everybody spoke Japanese.
But, officially at school you have to speak only in Korean.
I see.
But strange Korean, because teacher never learned Korean in Korea. They only learned Korean in Japan.
Right.
So that their Korean language is so different from both, South Korea or
but
North
surely
Korea.
they're reading books from North Korea, they're watching videos from North Korea. Was it really so different?
It's different. It's we call it a Zainichi, 한국 Zainichi word.
Right.
It's different.
There's also something that I'm curious about, the 10 great principles for establishing a monolithic leadership, something. It's a very long name, the Shipdae Wonchik. Did you also have to memorize these in Japan?
Yes. There was even a competition sometimes. 말씀, 학습. We have to memorize. And then the teacher or the student's leader, that was me, check, who memorized faster than others and something like that. But I don't know, these days Korean schools are changing to get a fund from Japanese, the regional, the taxes. I don't know that there should be, the Japanese government stopped funding Korean school mostly. So, and parents and students want to change the content of the education. So they are slowly changing, I've heard. And I think the ideological education starts only from high school these days.
Oh, that is quite different, yeah. I think I read years ago, and I mean more than 10 years ago, that they even removed the portraits of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il from the classrooms. Did you hear that?
Oh.
That they took down the portraits of Kim the father and Kim the son.
From elementary school and junior high school, they took it away. But high school, they still have.
Right.
And my relatives in Japan
Yep.
recently graduated from Korean junior high, and he decided to go to the local Japanese school, and he's now so happy. And I asked him, why are you so happy? And he said, oh, he's free from strange ideological education, and he doesn't have to wear the red ties.
Yeah.
So, there still remains that kind of education.
So you're still in contact with your your relatives in Japan?
Sure. My families are all in Japan. I don't have my family here. My husband family. I only have my husband family
right.
here.
So I want to go back to the story of your uncle who moved as a 17-year-old to North Korea. Where did he settle? Which city did he go to live in?
Wonsan.
He went to Wonsan,
Yeah.
which is on the east coast of North Korea, the major city in the province of Gangwon province.
Yes, and where we arrive,
So the ferry from Niigata always stops at Wonsan. Oh, for some reason I thought it would go to Chongjin, but it goes to Wonsan, does it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I always could find them from the deck of the Mangyongbong, and I immediately found them. Even when I first went to North Korea, I could find my cousins because they were wearing the clothes that I used to wear.
Right. They're wearing your hand-me-downs. Okay. So before we get into more detail about your uncle and his family, you have, as you said, you still have all your family in Japan today. Some of them still go to the Minjok Hakkyo. After what happened to your uncle, how is that possible? How does that make? Is there some tension in the family?
It's my younger sister's husband family. They somehow related to Chongryon still. They were working at the enterprises affiliated with Chongryon. So her mother-in-law wanted to send them to Korean school, but my sister actually didn't want to, so she decided to quit.
Quit the Chongryon.
Yes, quit the Chongryon and almost stopped sending her kids to Korean school, and from this year. And she says she's so happy with that. And most people who send their kids to Korean school, maybe partly because of the personal relationships within the community, or it's the way they make a living. They are working under the enterprises affiliated with Chongryon, or they really ideologically support North Korea. I think there are three groups of people who still send their kids to Korean school. And some people say that it's pure the ethnic education, but we all know it's not.
All right, so let's go back to your uncle and his family. So you went to visit them a few times.
Yes.
When was the last time that you saw them?
That was the second trip in 1996 when I took a trip with my mom. It was 2 weeks schedule. All the business-related people under Chongryon, and we applied for that trip because my mom wanted to see her brother, and my father was going to go with her, not me. But my father said, he never wanted to go to North Korea. He never wanted to be related to North Korea. He wanted to forget about it.
He had seen enough.
That's why I, suddenly my mom asked me to go with her. And the first trip, when I was at high school, I slept overnight at their home in Wonsan. It was allowed.
It was allowed, yeah.
And they looked okay, even though they didn't look happy. And it seemed to me that, they are tolerating the life there, especially my uncle. My uncle seemed to me that he is tolerating, he's enduring the society, because he said he knew the taste of freedom, until the teenagers at the age of 17, he was in Kobe, Japan. He was enjoying hamburgers, steaks, hot bath, and the music, and everything. And suddenly he lost everything.
Did he marry the girl that he followed to North Korea?
No, he never met her. Because it was impossible in North Korea to find someone. He doesn't know where she lives. it's not allowed to move around.
Right.
And if you are assigned in Wonsan, you have to stay in Wonsan.
Right. So he was assigned to Wonsan. Did he married a woman there?
Yes.
Was she a local?
No. They never married with local people because their culture is so different. He got married to a woman who returned to North Korea alone, just like him, at the age of 17.
Oh, wow.
She was from Tokyo.
Yeah.
She was also from Korean high school in Tokyo. And the similar situation, he got married and he had 3 children, my cousins, 3 cousins at my age. And first time I went there, it was okay. They didn't look happy, but they are richer than other local people because we supported them, money and everything. And they even drove a car. They drove me around in Wonsan City.
Oh.
And they said they feel special because they have relatives in Japan.
Yeah.
And that's why they can endure the life there. And it was a very important pipe for them, of having us. That's what I felt as a high school student. And they envy of me.
They envied you.
Yes.
Right.
I talked with them throughout the night. I slept with my cousin, the youngest girl. She was 11 years old at the first time I went there, and I talked to her a lot throughout the night.
What year was this?
1990.
1990.
The first time I went there, and she said she is dreaming someday of going to Japan, and I don't know, but the first visit was okay. They're okay. They were, the family was all fine and okay, and they have everything that we sent. But the second time,
this is 1996.
Yes,
Okay.
Right after we arrived at Wonsan, we noticed something had happened to them because at Wonsan port, my uncle was not there. There was only 3 cousins and his wife was there, and they look so sad. And my mom and I realized something had happened to them. And I asked them right after we deported, we asked them that, where's uncle?
Yeah.
And then they didn't answer. They just said nothing. But we were not allowed to talk to them. We all had to go to Pyongyang first.
Without them or with them?
Without them.
Okay.
It's all scheduled. That kind of group tour all scheduled. They drag us around all the historical sites and statues, and we have to bow and everything. And we had to wait to see them until the last day of the schedule. We are allowed only to see them the final day of departure, only a couple of hours, on the day of departure. And that was terrible. My mom gave so much money to the watchman and asked him to find her brother. Where is he? And he just said, he went on a business trip and he's busy, so just wait. And we waited until the last day of the trip. And on the last day, we only had 3 hours or something, and we gave bribe again, and then
to the minder, the government guide,
because we wanted to talk by ourselves. So we were allowed to go their home in Wonsan, and we went their home, and they all started to cry right after we arrived at their home. And it was all tears, and they said, their father disappeared a couple of months ago. Disappeared, and they are under a threat also. They're scared.
So they didn't know where he was. He hadn't been arrested. There was no report from the public security agency or anything like that?
They just said secret police took him away. And
that's the Boibu?
Boibu.
Yeah.
And they also said it's like Gestapo.
The German Gestapo.
Yes,
yeah.
Gestapo. And they all cried, and we didn't know, what to do. And so my mom wanted to make them eat something, the meat, the bulgogi or something. I remember we took them to bulgogi restaurant, and my mom encouraged them, we're going to come back soon. So don't worry, just stay alive.
And that's where the photograph was taken. That's in Yifang's story that came out.
That's the photograph. That was in 1990 when I was in high school. I was wearing the chogori, the uniform. Yeah. And my mom gave them all the money she had, the Japanese yen, and just said, stay alive. We're going to come back soon and we will find out the way, we can help you. But, that's the last time I saw them.
And did you ever hear any news in Japan about what happened? Did you ever get any more letters or any rumors from other people in Japan?
No letters anymore, no phone calls. And
the Chongryon was not helpful?
No. And Chongryon even did not allow us to visit North Korea after that. We are, declined our request. We have to get allowance from Chongryon if we want to visit North Korea, but they didn't give us admittance. So
it's like an unofficial embassy, and they have to give you something like a visa. And if they don't give it, you can't go. Right.
So it's been, the years and years. There was no contact at all.
Yeah. So 26 years now since you saw your cousins. What have you heard since coming to South Korea about your uncle?
Okay. After marrying to South Korean man, I started to live in South Korea from 1999. And I kind of wanted to forget about my relatives in North Korea because when I got married to this man, my relatives in Japan, especially on my mother's side relatives who were more pro-North Korean relatives, opposed to my marriage because my marriage to South Korea may harm them in North Korea, And that was so hard for me. And I kind of wanted to forget about everything and start a new life here. I also wanted to be ordinary South Korean citizen. I was kind of tired of being Zainichi too, because it's so many stories, so many burdens, so many ideology, nations, and networks, and I was tired of it. So I wanted to be an ordinary South Korean citizen, but I could not. And in 2017, it was 5 years ago, I met South Korean defector.
A North Korean defector?
Yes, North
in
Korean.
South Korea.
Yeah, in South Korea. I met a North Korean defector on YouTube show.
Oh.
He wanted to hear my story. So I went on that show and tell him about my relatives in North Korea. And I have no idea whether they're alive or not.
Yeah.
And after that show, I got an email from a North Korean defector who is living in Japan, Mr. Kim. And he said he is a closest friend.
Is he living in Japan because he has Zainichi origins?
Yes.
Or So because the recent interview I did with Marcus Bell was about the Zainichis who moved to North Korea and then came back to South Korea many years later, or sometimes their children came to Japan many years later, I should say, not to South Korea, to Japan. So Mr. Kim was one of those people who went back to Japan because he felt more comfortable in Japan. Maybe he felt there was more cultural connection with Japan than South Korea.
Yeah, because he went to North Korea when he was 18 or something. And he has no one here in South Korea, no relatives. So he decided to go to Japan. And Japan allows that, the returnees of the Paradise on Earth program. The Japanese government accept them as the refugee. So there are about 200 North Korean defectors now living in Japan.
Right.
And Mr. Kim is one of them. And he called me and he said he is the closest friend of my uncle.
So he lived in Wonsan and he knew your uncle from Wonsan?
Yes.
Okay.
And he knew everything about my uncle, what happened to him.
When did Mr. Kim leave North Korea to go to Japan?
He said around 2000 or something. And he was so lucky, he was successful escaping. And I fly to Japan to meet him. And he told me what happened to my uncle's family. And he said in the beginning of 1996, during the New Year's holiday, my uncle received a phone call from another big uncle from Japan.
Mhm.
They regularly talked once or twice in a year.
So another brother of your mother.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, in Japan.
Right.
And my big uncle in Japan said that Romanian government was thrown away by the people of Romania.
Mm.
And, the socialist communist is almost close to end. So North Korea is almost close to end. So
Right.
just enjoy a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to end soon. That's what he said. And all the people, he was with his friends, all the returnees from Japan. They were drinking and having a dinner together or something. And they were all frozen because international phone calls are all wiretapped.
Mm.
And listening to that kind of statement is a crime in North Korea. And a few days, the Mr. Kim was also there. And everybody at that room was all taken away, arrested by the secret police.
Yep.
And they are interrogated, investigated. And then Mr. Kim said, when they interrogate, they torture, they beat people, and they force everybody to say everything they have discussed in the past, and if you say something, you may be relieved. And one of their friends said, my uncle said that one day he said he wanted to shoot Kim Jong-il if he had a machine gun or something like that when he was drunk. That's why he was not discharged. And he also had a phone calls from, Japan. And his charge became more serious. Then my uncle was tortured and beaten to death during the investigation. So Mr. Kim told me that he was already dead when I was in North Korea in the summer.
Of 96.
Yes. That's what he told me. And he also witnessed what happened to the remaining family. He said...
This is your cousins and your aunt.
Yes.
Right.
In the end of 1996, the remaining family were all taken away. It was the early morning of the very cold winter morning. They were taken away to somewhere. And everybody knows that, they were taken to the political prison camp. And that's what Mr. Kim told me.
Right.
And then the next year, that was...
But did you believe him immediately?
Yes, because his story was so concrete, and he knew everything about my uncle and even about us, because my uncle told about us, and he even saw us when I was in Wonsan.
Okay.
He was there.
Yep.
And he tried to find us right after he arrived in Japan, but he had no, phone numbers and everything. And he just, by chance, he watched the YouTube show. That was, me talking about the Wonsan relatives. And I look very similar to my cousins in North Korea. So he immediately noticed that it was me.
Right.
It's relatives. And he was so happy that he found me. And
just, I'm going to interrupt with a question. In general, what do Zainichi Koreans believe about prison camps in North Korea? What do they know and what do they believe?
They knew that, prison camp existed because we heard so many rumors that somebody is taken away to the deep mountain. Deep mountain means the prison camp or the jail sometimes. But very early, the stage of the Paradise on campaign, Paradise on Earth campaign, we knew that there's somewhere, if they make a mistake, they're going to take you away somewhere else in the deep mountain. And we knew that's the prison camp. And it's so hard to get out of that place once, jailed. And they knew that.
So were you able to find out more about what happened to your cousins and your aunt?
Yes. The next year, that was 2018, after I met Mr. Kim, I got another phone call from North Korean defector who is living in South Korea. And she said she knows her friend stayed in the same residential area at Yodok camp. That's number 15 prison camp.
It's one of the most famous camps in North Korea.
For 8 years, they stayed together. Her friend was there, living almost in the same house with my auntie and the daughter cousin, because the men and women are all separated. So she knows about my auntie and my daughter cousin. They spent together for 8 years at the prison camp.
Wow.
That's what she said. And this woman who is now living in Seoul, she also knows my uncle's family, and her friend was with them in the camp, she said. And her friend, I would say Mr. Lee, she was relieved so luckily from prison camp in 2005.
Oh, she was released?
Yes, released.
Why? What,
because
good behavior? Or?
Her relative has such a big power in Chongryon, and he was so rich. He was running a pachinko parlor. Her brother in Japan was running a pachinko parlor, and he paid 500 million won per person.
So, and how many people were in his family were in Yodok?
5.
So that's 25.
No, but only female could be released.
Oh, I see.
Men never relieved. Even you pay more money, but it's impossible, And she said only female prisoners were relieved after paying so much money, and they are still living in Wonsan, she said. And
but how did they get? How did their story about your relatives get out then, if they're still living in North Korea?
Before this woman in Seoul escaped from North Korea, she met this woman in Wonsan, she said. And then she heard about my auntie's and my cousin daughter's story. And when they are released in 2005, this woman said, my auntie and my cousins are almost, severely malnourished, and they're all skins and bones. So there's no hope that they're still alive, she said. That's what I heard. So it became very clear that, they're obviously arrested in the end of 1996, and they all taken away to the Yodok camp. And then after that, I found this book. This is by the NKDB, the database center, and I went there.
So it looks like it's in Japanese language.
Yeah, they published in Japanese. It's the personal list of the prisoners of the political prison camp in North Korea, and I just went this office by chance as an interpreter of a group of people from Japan who is investigating North Korean human rights issues. And I was there as an interpreter. And they gave me this book because it's written in Japanese. And I was looking at this like this, and I found out my uncle's name.
Wow.
Here's my uncle's name.
Let's have a look.
And he was arrested in 1996, and their families are all in Yodok.
Okay. Now, I don't read Japanese very well, so I can see 1996 is here, so that's the year of his arrest. What other information is given here?
There's a name of my uncle, and the year they were arrested, 1996, and the reason unknown, it's said, and all the families were there.
So the name of his wife and his 3 children?
No name.
It says wife and 3 children. Okay.
Yeah. And I asked the staff of the NKTV, how did you find out this information? And they said they interviewed every North Korean defectors at Hanawan. They were allowed to interview. But it was not allowed now.
No, that's right.
So they interviewed so many North Korean defectors in the early 2000s, and they made this book.
So they made a list for that. Okay.
So I don't know who testified about my family
Could it be the same woman who now lives in Seoul?
Maybe, yes, but she doesn't remember, if it's her, who testified about my family.
So it's possible, I mean, at the very least, you have heard now from two different sources, two independent sources,
Yes.
that your uncle is dead and that your aunt and cousins went to the Yodok camp, number 15. And possibly this could be a third independent source. So you have multiple sources now. So how sure are you that it's true?
I am sure, because it's obvious they were there, and there's no contact at all since 1996. It's the end, they don't exist after that.
Now, how do South Korean people react when you tell your story?
South Korean people, overall, South Korean people, they're, including my husband, they're not so interested in the human rights issues in North Korea. They're too busy in this competitive society. Everything goes so competitive here in South Korea, and South Korean people are not interested in even, that North Korea launched a missile or nuclear weapon. They're not interested. Oh, they're doing that again. And
so do you think that the root of the problem is that South Korean people are just too busy? They don't have any time or space to think about North Korea?
And it's been too long. It's been 70 years, they're divided, and nothing has changed at all. So they're fed up with this kind of issue, maybe, and they think it's a burden. It's a big burden financially or emotionally to have, North Korea nearby, as a neighbor. And even though they, emphasize we are in the same race, ethnically, same, the blood or something, they are getting, tired of it.
Could it also be part of the problem, the fact that the South Korean government has, in the past, sometimes used stories of defectors and also of your family members as a tool or even a weapon to achieve South Korean ends?
I beg your pardon.
So the South Korean government, not so much now, but in the past has used stories about, life is terrible in North Korea, human rights terrible in North Korea, as a way to score some ideological points or to make an ideological victory against North Korea.
Yes, some people say that. And they think the testimony of North Korean defectors are not true. They are exaggerating. Some people try to not believe everything they say. Like, for example, there are so many TV shows of North Korean defectors. They're testifying what they've gone through in North Korea. But some South Korean people don't trust them. They are exaggerating. They are just making stories for money.
Let's be honest here. It not everybody is 100% truthful in life. Even for not just North Koreans, just in the world, nobody's truthful 100% of the time. And it's not helpful when sometimes there are people who tell stories which are not true, right? I mean, just as an example, a very famous book that was published many years ago called The Escape from Camp 14, not 15, but 14. This is the story of Shin Dong-hyuk.
Yeah.
The book was written by Blaine Harden, who was a famous American journalist. And a few years after that book was published, some things came out that made it look like not everything Shin Dong-hyuk said was true in that book. How do we deal with it? How do we know what's true and what's not true? And should people still believe North Korean defectors' testimony?
You have to keep, speaking out. It's obviously true. It's the worst country in the world. The worst human right. There's a serious abuse of human right in North Korea, and people should admit that. But for some ideological reason, people try not to believe that, but it's very limited amount of people, I think. Most people know that it's serious in North Korea, the human rights issues is so serious, but nothing has changed, and there's no way that we can change the North Korea. That's why people are becoming more indifferent to it. And reunification. People, they say we should be reunified, but it's been 70 years, and they feel it's like a foreigner. Working with the North Korean defectors and South Koreans, I've been working with both of them all together. I was a member of the YouTube channel called Bena TV once. Now Bena TV on a YouTube channel. Now they're all split and they quit. But there was a big fight and it's a big mess. And sometimes South Korean people think North Korean defectors, it's a sense of difference. It's so big. It's like more than foreigner.
Yeah.
And even my husband said to me that, when I introduced my North Korean friend to him, he is an ordinary South Korean citizen, and he doesn't feel comfortable with them. He said he even feels comfortable with the Japanese friend I have, or even the American friend, because they share the same value, the same circumstances, background, and similar, the value they have. But the North Koreans, they behave differently.
Yeah.
They react sometimes differently when they get excited or they went mad. They react differently, and he said he just feel uncomfortable with them, and he doesn't want to. He thinks he doesn't want to be a friend. Sometimes
when you say that they react differently when they become angry or excited, are they more violent? Are they aggressive? Do they shout more?
I saw some of that case situation, and but that was normal in North Korea. But so I can understand, but people who don't know well about North Korea, they get surprised. Oh, how can they react like this? They shout or they get more excited sometimes. So North Korean defectors sometimes emphasize that South Korean people discriminate against North Korean defectors. But partly that's true. Yes, some people discriminate, but I feel it's more than a discrimination. It's more than a simple discrimination. It's rather than discrimination. It's more a sense of difference. And they are not comfortable with them because it's so different. It's 70 years under the different regime.
How do you want South Koreans to react to the story of your uncle and his family and other defector stories? What's the ideal reaction?
It could be my story all the time. In my case, I always imagine listening to their story. It could be my story because
your father could have moved there.
Yeah, my parents wanted to move to North Korea, and I could be. My cousin could be me, and I always thought about that and imagined that. And this kind of imagination is very important, I think. It could be my story. And so the way we appeal should be somehow changed, I believe. We always appeals to the justice of people, sense of justice, or anger, or expertise, and the journalists and the university professor all gathered, and they discuss more academic way all the expertise, but the ordinary people don't find interest in that kind of story. So it should be more storytelling. Through individual life story. I think all individual life story reflects the history, the regime, everything. So I think we should approach differently. We need a shift.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I'm a big fan of storytelling, and that's what we try and do in this podcast here. We get people to come on and to tell stories, and that is what makes humans different from animals, is that we tell stories, narratives. In the case of thinking about what people can do, that's a really difficult question, because in relationships between country and country, the lives of individual peoples and families, they often become sacrificed, don't they? Whether it's a war like we're seeing now in Ukraine with Russia, or whether it's in the case of North Korea, like with your uncle and his family, that you might know where they are, even if they're still alive, but there's nothing you can do because the state-to-state relations are so bad. What can we ordinary people do?
Not to forget. Maybe it's myself, I sometimes want to forget because nobody's interested in it and nothing has been done for them. I somehow feel guilty of not keeping my words. I promised them that I will come back soon, but I forgot, and I was married to this South Korean man, and I been living happily, and it hurts me.
Yeah.
So sometimes I just want to forget everything about them, but remembering them is the only thing that I can do now, and telling my story to people, and it's been so sad for me to have two grandmother, for example, who believes the different Korea.
Yeah.
My grandmother in mother's side, she has a portrait at her house, because...
A portrait of Kim Il-sung?
Yes, and she even bowed to him.
Is she still alive now?
No, because she had her son sent to North Korea.
Yeah.
So she thought showing loyalty would be the insurance to protect her son in North Korea.
Yeah. When did she die?
She died when I was in college, but she never knew that she was in prison.
She never knew what happened.
Yeah, we didn't tell her because.
So you knew, but you didn't tell her. Right.
And she was, of course, from southern part of South Korea. She was from more than 97% of Zainichi Koreans are originated from southern part of Korean Peninsula, and she's from the Chungcheongdo, South Korea, when she was 19. During the Japan's occupation, she moved to Japan, but she never ever returned to South Korea and met her parents again because her husband was pro-North Korea supporter, and she even sent her son, the youngest son, to North Korea. So she tried to trust North Korea as a fatherland, and that was so sad. And my grandmother on father's side, she hated North Korea so badly, and as I told you before, she once returned to Busan after the World War II in 1945 with my father, and she endured for 8 years selling kimchi. And she experienced the Korean War, and so decided to return to Japan. Go back to Japan on the wooden boat. She said as a illegal immigrant.
Yeah, as illegal. Wow. Okay.
That's I saw some statistics that I call this the U-turn group. The Zainichi, more than 30 to 50% of Zainichi residents in Japan, they are a group of the returnees, the U-turn group. Once they returned to Korea after the war, but the Korea was a mess, and there was a Korean War, so they decided to go back to Japan illegally. So illegal immigrants.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if Min-jin Lee is listening, if she wants to write another book, she can write your family story.
But Min-jin Lee is now maybe busy. She's writing about hagwon in Korea.
Is that right?
Heard, yeah.
Have you met her?
No, I wish I could someday, and I want to thank her for writing.
Well, if she does hear this, or if her agent hears this, she can send an email to podcast@nknews.org, and we'll put you in touch. Well, I want to thank you for telling the story of your uncle and his. What is his name? What was your uncle's name?
도석근, Mr. Do.
He was a doshi. Yeah.
도시, 충청도 도시.
And his wife, do you remember her name?
이희순.
이희순.
Yes.
And their 3 children, who we don't know whether they're alive or dead. You assume that they're probably dead, you said?
Yes, because all the North Korean defectors told me that, there's no hope of, being alive after, such a long time. No.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I just thank you for listening to my story. I don't know whether my story would be helpful for anybody, but, meeting the people like you and all the listeners of NK News, it's encouraging. And it reminds me of my families there and their empty, sad eyes that I saw lastly, and the importance of human rights issues in North Korea that I sometimes wanted to forget, but I shouldn't. It reminds me that kind of the mission that I have. So I thank you for listening to my story, and I hope you would maybe pray for my families in North Korea and the people of North Korea. Yeah, I thank you.
No, thank you very much, Park Hyangsu, for coming here. And I think it's an important story. And as you say, really, what we ordinary people can do who don't have the power to change government policy is what we can do is to remember the lives and the names of the people who have suffered and to tell their stories because they can't tell them themselves.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So thanks once more for coming on the show. And thanks also to my colleague Ifang Bremer for introducing us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed, or rather, well, it seems like the wrong word to use, if you found today's podcast story to be as moving and as interesting as I did, I hope that you will share it with as many people as possible so that more people can listen to it and can learn about some of the sad realities of lives of people who voluntarily moved from Japan to North Korea during the Paradise on Earth campaign. That's where we'll end today's podcast. But not before reminding you, if you already have an NK News account, and if you're a think tank, business, or academic institution, take a look at NK Pro. Our NK Pro platform offers unparalleled services, specifically catering to the needs of professionals who monitor developments on the Korean Peninsula. You can inquire about access and a free trial membership by writing an email to membership@nknews.org today. Our thanks, as always, go to Arius Dare and Brian Betts for facilitating this podcast, and to our post-recording producer genius, Gabby Magnuson, who cuts out all the extraneous noises, awkward silences, bodily functions, etc. Thanks, and listen again next time.